Good evening and welcome to the February 27th, 2013 school committee meeting. Our first order of business is roll call. All members are present, Linda, thank you. And our next item of business, approval of items by consensus, Superintendent Benton.
Good evening, everyone. There are two items on the consent agenda. Approval of the minutes from the February 13th regular session school committee and warrants, payroll 213, SPED 15, SPED 16, circuit breaker 10, circuit breaker 11, grants 415, 416, Art 219, Art 220, and L26, L27.
Okay, thank you. I entertain a motion for approval of the minutes of February 13th, regular session. Mrs. Bonner.
I make a motion to approve the minutes of February 13th, regular session.
Okay, second, Mrs. Carroll. All those in favor? Unanimous, Linda? The next one would be the payroll warrant, approval of payroll warrant of 213. Mrs. Burns.
I'll make a motion on payroll warrant 21313.
Okay, and do we have a second? Dr. Quick. All those in favor? 5 in favor and 2 abstain, Mrs. Carroll and Mrs. Kane. Thank you. Our next warrants, SPED 15, 16, CB 10, and CB 11. Mr. Hayes.
So
Thank
moved.
you. Thank you. Second? Mr. Mullis. All those in favor? 6 in favor and 1 abstain. Mrs. Burns. And then we can all do these. Approval of warrants G 415, 416, R 219 and 220, and L 26 and 27. Mr. Mullis.
So moved.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Dr. Quick, thank you. All those in favor? Okay, unanimous. Thank you. Wow, I've got it. It
Nice
only
work.
took about 4 months. Thank you. All right. Our next, let me see, was that? Yes. Our student representative report, we will not have the student representative with us tonight, so she'll be here for next month. All right, and next will be the superintendent's report.
I'm going to actually add 2 items to that report. In front of you is a personnel report that we talk about a couple of a resignation and replacements. In your packet this evening, you have a grants report. As you recall, we were fortunate back in FY 09, 10, and 11 to get ARRA stimulus funds, but those have dried up. So this year we have $1.3 million worth of grants, which hopefully will not be affected on Friday when the government does or does not vote to do something with the budget. We're being told now, I don't think we'll have any effects till October, but we'll keep you informed.
Okay. Okay.
You also,
Oh, I'm sorry. Did anyone have any questions on these grants?
How would that, God, in the worst case scenario, how would that affect the budget that we've prepared for next year?
these grants are, go through August, don't they, Mr. Gutierrez? Or
Some of them go
some-
through August, September 1 to August 31st.
Okay.
So we won't know. I mean, for example, if the kindergarten grant were cut, we'd have to absorb it for the rest of the year. For this year, we'd have to absorb
I see.
it for the rest of the year from our operating budget. But we're not hearing that that's going to happen. So at least we'll have sort of some warning of what might happen.
Okay.
And so we'll keep you informed. I also wanted to talk about our exciting news with the demolition of the high school gymnasium. It was quite a week last week, and thanks to our resident photographer, Sandy, our payroll specialist, we have a chronological order of the taking down of the gymnasium that we will be putting on our website so that we can have a history of all that has gone on. I want to commend the CM at Reston Gilbane, Mike Marcella, and his assistant Kate McGovern. They did a phenomenal job. It was fascinating to watch. I've never seen that parking lot so clean. Every night they swept. The recycling was quite an education in how they recycled all the different materials, the different piles, and They're actually a week ahead of schedule, so it was amazing.
great.
The return of students and staff on Monday, we did not have, in fact, Mike Marcella greeted me in the parking lot at 6 o'clock that morning. They shoveled, if you remember, we had a little bit of snow. They shoveled out the walks and actually went in and cleaned the weight room to make sure there was no dust. So they've done phenomenal work. So I think, let it be said that if this is a sign of things to come with the project, we're going to be very fortunate. No reports from the high school of any disruptions of noise, and so
Great.
let's hope that the rest of the project goes as well.
That's excellent news.
That's it.
Okay, our next item is old business, buildings and ground policy, ECA, second reading.
Last meeting presented you with a couple of revisions to the buildings and ground security policy, ECA, excuse me. I'm looking for favorable action on approval of this policy this evening.
Okay. I'd entertain a motion to accept the buildings and grounds policy, ECA. Mrs. Bonnet.
Make a motion to approve the building and ground policy ECA.
Thank you. Second, Mrs. Carroll. Those in favor? Okay, unanimous. Thank you.
I'd like to publicly thank the subcommittee, Mrs. Bonish, Mr. Hayes, and Mrs. Kane.
Thank you. Our next item is new business. Our first item under that, summer reading recommendation.
I'd like to invite Dr. Kathy Macklis, who's our new ELA coordinator, pre-K through 12 up, to talk about some exciting changes that she'd like to propose for our students this year.
Thank you so much, and I'm so excited to be here, and I want to say that the proposal that you have is something that was not done in isolation. It was done with the help of teachers, with reaching out to supporting communities. I have to, before I even begin, I have to mention how wonderful each and every one of the librarians has been, starting with Heather Peachy on up, who came to me a few weeks ago and brought up, we were talking quite seriously about looking for a book that would grab everybody in the middle school's interest. And we wanted something that was exciting, but we wanted something that would also connect to some of the values that we support and want to have spread through our community here in Wilmington. We were looking for themes like friendship and loyalty and the bonds of family, and the book that kept coming up was this new book, Wonder. And I don't know if you're familiar with this. This is a book that is, I'm going to get choked up when I bring it up. It's a young boy who is born with a genetic disorder, and he's physically disfigured, and he has been homeschooled and then wants to start middle school. His parents want him to start in this middle school, and it's about his first year in a series of experiences in this middle school. It will make you laugh. It will make you cry. I have teachers already reading it. I have teachers reading it to their children at home, and everybody, I don't think there is anybody that has come back without saying that it has kept them thinking. It's optimistic, but it's truthful, and I think on whatever level you can take it, you become really connected. The hope is that by having a one-school read, it will create such powerful discussion and thinking that they'll come back and they will, instead of doing a typical standardized multiple choice test, they'll have discussion in their classrooms and they will write a written response to it. That means everybody from 6th grade on up. And this way, we're connecting with the Common Core. We're doing all the ELA standards, but we're doing it in a way that we're going to have that bonded framework in that building that has, 900 kids or something like that. So everybody will have come away from that experience with something really powerful. The book is phenomenal. If you haven't read it, I strongly encourage it. I'm more than happy to send you the reviews. It's definitely, it should have won the Newbery. It's just phenomenal. Very quickly, I'm just going to move on to high school because I know there's a lot on our calendar for tonight. I think that this author, Jay Atkinson, is a local gentleman. I believe he's from Methuen, and he's now teaching at BU in the journalism program. And again, with the high school, we were looking for the same kind of experience, a one-school read, but we decided that there was kind of a dividing line between 9th and 10th and 11th and 12th. And we thought that both of these books as a collective really represent, again, the same kinds of values. Ice time is something I think that hockey and sports and coaching are something that most of the students in this community understand. And this is it takes you through the year in a life of a team. This one is, well, it's a real attention grabber, The Legends of the Winter Hill. And it's nonfiction. It follows the life in a year of a policeman. And I think, again, we're supporting the Common Core, but with these books, we're going to invite the author to come and speak to the school about the writing process. We're so lucky. I know that Tina in the library told me that he is an incredibly charismatic speaker, and we'll follow it up also with the same kind of writing experience. So I think that both of these books will be page turners, and I can't say enough nice things about them.
Thank you. Any questions, Mrs. Burns?
I have a couple of comments and then
Yes.
one question.
Yes.
I have to say, I'm having my daughter, actually, we're going to download the Wonder Book for that, because I think
Yes.
the diversity with students, especially with those with physical
Yes. Yes.
oddities of sorts. I apologize if I'm not politically correct, but whether it be tics or something physically in nature, I think is it opens up that discussion for acceptance, and it's not the book cover as much as it's what's inside the book.
Absolutely.
And secondly, I looked up Mr. Atkinson, and I did find a book that I'm probably going to look into with regards to his take on Jack Kerouac's.
Yes.
Which I'm a little bit of a beatnik kind of
I think
from that literature piece from that era of the 70s, which I find fascinating. And what I find fascinating is his approach to writing.
Yes.
As opposed to his perspective and his humor, and I find that too is a big enticement with regards to how one reads the experiences that he has now composed in pages in black and white, which I think if it can put one's person in his shoes and go through the process and the experience with him, I think it's that much more inspiring for kids to be able to discuss and create that. I do have one question, and I'm not sure if you can answer it.
Yep.
Is are these books available in audio form as well?
All three.
Okay,
All three.
very good.
Absolutely. We the librarians checked on that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Kindle or Nook or, yeah.
Okay, any other
Thank you very
questions?
much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Can I just comment on, the reason that we brought this before you this evening is presently, your summer reading is part of your homework policy, which the policy subcommittee is recommending separating, taking that out, the summer reading out of the policy for homework. So we wanted to present
Do
to
we
you.
need to make a motion
No.
on this tonight? No.
We wanted to
Okay.
present to you what we want to do with the summer reading, so. Again, I thank you to Dr. Mackles.
Thank you, that's great. Better than we could have thought, that's excellent. Okay, our next item of business would be the middle school schedule. Superintendent Benton,
Invite
yes, please come.
Principal Nick Miniman and Assistant Principals Hope Doran and Terry Sheehan to the table. I also want to make sure you met Kathy, Paul Monaco, who's the pre-K to 12 STEM coordinator, and our own Linda Peters, who's the math coordinator, are here this evening to support this proposal. We have had a challenge over the past few years at Wilmington Middle School, and some of it unfortunately made the press for the wrong reasons, and that's that our MCAS scores, especially in 8th grade in mathematics, students, 50% of the students were scoring either failed or needs improvement, and our English scores were not up to what I believe is appropriate for the students at the middle school. I charged the middle school administration with looking at a way to think about how we could change things. We tried some what I call Band-Aid approaches, doing some MCAS classes after school, trying to do some more professional development for the staff. But this was a piece to the puzzle that we all knew about. It was the elephant in the room, but no one wanted to talk about. And that is that it is recommended that students have 1 hour of content area a day. Our schedule, we had, in some cases, a few years ago, 38 minutes to 42 minutes. So we weren't even giving the children and the teachers the chance to cover the curriculum because the periods were too short. In addition, I believe that the schedule at the program at the middle school, while relevant in its day, is not relevant today. We have a Common Core that has been mandated by the federal government, which talks about an increased use of nonfiction in all subject areas, an increase in writing skills across the curriculum, and the way that the middle school schedule works does not allow teachers in complementary departments to work together. It does not allow us to think about how we could actually use our science and mathematics time to do nonfiction, utilize nonfiction teaching in those periods. In my opinion, nothing stays the same. And we're doing a disservice to our students if we don't make some changes. And I understand the change is difficult and it takes time. And ironically, I was at Merrimack College on Tuesday with the elementary principals at Think Tank that Rob Evans was the speaker, and the topic was change. And he talked about change being a process that involves grieving, because people have to go through steps in thinking about how they can think about a new idea when they've done something always the same way. So I understand that for some it'll be difficult to think about. I believe, as your educational leader for the town of Wilmington, that what the middle school has come up with is something that will increase student achievement at the middle school and will utilize the time in such a way that will allow us to not only work on the academic, but on the social emotional. And I refer to the advisor-advisee piece that will be allowing every student at the middle school to connect with an adult that they can feel safe with. What's interesting about all of this work, and I know that the administrators at the middle school are probably ready to kill me after, all the time that they've spent into it, and I kept sending them back, no, we need to do this, we need to do that, is word has already gotten out of Wilmington about what we're trying to do. And we've already had requests from, I think Christine had 4 schools asking to come visit Shrewsbury. I heard from Lexington, Winchester, Melrose, all SEAM communities saying what's going on over there because we think you have something that we want. So I ask you to be open-minded when you hear this presentation, and what my hope is that at the next school committee meeting, that the school committee will approve us to pilot this program next year, because the only way we'll know if it's going to work is if we try it. And that way, at that point, we could then survey parents, because you can't survey parents before because they don't know what the program is. We have to try it out first. So I ask you this evening to listen with an open mind and to consider any obstacles or questions you may have so that we can respond to those, and at the next meeting, hopefully, continue the conversation. So with that being said, I turn it over to the principal.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. And I did want Terry Sheehan and Hope Doran, our assistant principals, to be present here because we really shared the responsibility and the load of work that takes place here when you're talking about overhauling a master schedule in a building for, right now, 894 students, projected next year approximately 850. And as Mrs. Benton mentioned, you know, we had some excellent representation from our teachers, which we'll talk about, on our think tank that began last August. And we also were very fortunate to have Dr. Macklis, Mr. Monaco, Ms. Peters, Mrs. Burnham on board with us to really help guide us. And believe it or not, the first 2 sessions of our think tank back in August, which were about 4 hours each, really revolved around change and how we together as a group work toward change to make things improve. So if we want to move along, Mrs. Benton talked a little bit already about the background of why we are here. Certainly our AYP, success, not success in math and language arts, was a reason that we took a look at what could we do better. Yes, in 2012, we had some improvement toward the positive direction, and the scores are moving in a trajectory that will help us close the gap. That's great news, but we still wanted to be able to do more. And we are currently a level 2 middle school in the state, and our goal is to achieve level 1 status. So that's where our background came from, with Mrs. Benton giving us this charge. So our task that she gave us, to increase instructional minutes in both language arts and mathematics, and of course to maintain a comprehensive program of studies for middle school students. We understand the young adolescent. We understand that many times they're trying to find what they're great at, what they enjoy, what they like doing, what they like spending their time on. For some kids it's the drama club where they find their niche, and for some kids it's the math team, and for some kids it's the challenge of science and hands-on learning. So we really want to make sure that kids still have exposure to many content areas separate from the core subjects so that they can really become well-rounded. So that was really part of our task as well. So talking a little bit about the process, I mentioned that we reached out to the staff at the very, very beginning of the summer, and we invited people to come on board and really put our brains together. And we had great representation from our different core subjects of science and ELA and math, and we also had teachers from our Unified Arts Department in the visual arts, as well as technology, etc. So we really spent probably from the beginning to end, and meetings that went on through the fall, well into 20 hours, and really working on that collaboration, establishing trust, really meeting people from other districts and how they have gone through change in their buildings, and doing a lot of reading of articles and watching of some videos of places that have had successful reform. And it was really a great group to work with. And I think both Dr. Macklis and Mr. Monaco will say it was a great way to welcome them into the district, and they got to know a lot of the people on the think tank very well. We also had some school visits to Westford at Stony Brook Middle School and Ipswich, and we collaborated and shared information with both Stoneham and Reading, which was great help for us all. The members of the think tank are listed there. I just wanted to show you as a representation of all of the people that we worked with. A number of people on the staff stepped up to really come forward and do this work, do the dialogue, have the difficult discussions. Not to put anything in a hierarchy of what's more important, but here's our task, how do we get there? And really some people came together with some great ideas, really original, creative, that helped us get to where we are today. The next thing I had listed here in the presentation was, as a group of all of those people working on the think tank, we really had built some consensus. You know, in general, the majority of the people really kept listing and discussing these items as priorities for our school. As you can see, increased minutes in the core subjects, at least 60 minutes, better connections with students, getting to know our kids, and that was the advisory model that kept coming up in a manner to do that. Study skills and organizational support came up loud and clear. As the children come into the middle school, this is where they develop their metacognition and how they know how they learn best and learning how to learn. So that was really important to many of the people. The waterfall was a key component. And in that terminology for scheduling, it's the opportunity of the core subjects to flip to different times of the day so that you're not always having math first period perhaps when you are somewhat asleep at 7:30, and not always having ELA right after lunch when you might take the first 15 minutes to focus and redirect yourself from lunchtime. So it's just being able to see different kids at different times of the day and their different perspectives. That was very much echoed through many of our meetings. Physical education staying as a year-long course. Approximately 6 years ago, before the original schedule had changed, when I came on board in the district, there were some students that had a gap in a rotation that did not have physical education every week. So there were 7 rotations throughout the year, and some kids had 3 rotations of phys ed out of the 7, and then they would have computer literacy or health. So it was a big change when we went to phys ed every other day for the whole school year, and that was a key component for people to keep on board, at least having it all year long and consistent activity to promote health and wellness. Maintaining foreign language in grades 7 and 8. We had done some discussion about perhaps eliminating the 6th grade introductory program. Maybe they're not quite ready. Maybe they have to focus more on their reading comprehension and ELA, but definitely the think tank wanted to keep it in the 7th and the 8th grade. This is what Mrs. Benton had spoken about, interdisciplinary connections. We have a recommendation that will allow pods of students to share the same 2 teachers for the 2 blocks in a row. So let's say 2 math and science teachers, they have 25 students in math. Those same children go to science, and they can flip-flop or extend the period or shorten the period as needed by the curriculum. And so that was something that a lot of the people on the think tank wanted, and they really enjoyed that perspective. Flexible scheduling is what I just mentioned, the ability to flip-flop. So let's say science needed time for a lab, and they needed 75 minutes of the 2 blocks, and then the science and the math teacher could communicate at the beginning of the week and say, I'm going to take them Thursday for that lab. You can have those minutes back on Friday because you're doing a prompt that's going to require a lot of writing, something along those lines. They have that flexibility. And technology integration through a co-taught model. And that's really more of a model that we're moving to, hopefully district-wide, where the technology teacher is right there alongside, which we do have right now with Mrs. Lamano at the middle school, co-teaching with a social studies or a science teacher, and really coming out with a great product using the tools of technology. I can give the example because they were on the bulletin board today on the 2nd floor. One of the science teachers in the 8th grade was doing volcano resumes, and the students had to select a volcano and write a resume formatted with the cooperation of Mrs. Lamano in the computer lab and describe themselves to a prospective employer. And they were phenomenal. There was also a 3D hands-on component to that project, but the science teacher and the technology integration teacher refined that project to make the students use technology as a way to get their knowledge out. And it was just an outstanding example of what we would like to see on a daily basis with all students, and that's the model that we hope to go to. So those were the priorities that the think tank came up with, and now it's our job to come up with that schedule that can try and incorporate as many of those priorities as we can. So this is the proposed schedule, and it still is on a 6-day cycle, which we currently have. This is a sample of a day 1-2 block. There would still be 6 days, as I mentioned, in the cycle. Every student would start off with an advisory block with the same adult every morning, with approximately 12 to 1 student ratio in that advisory. That would be a time for that organization, for that study skills, for that check-in, and that trust building. Not only would you be building the trust with the adult, but you would also be building trust within that small learning group, and there would be sort of a built-in peer group for every kid in the building. And if you read Wonder, you will see that that is an important piece of the puzzle when dealing with young adolescents. So then you would have 2 core subjects, if you are a 6th grader, 2 core subjects in a row, both of those being 60 minutes, and then it would be time for a unified arts class. For example, health, foreign language, music, art, those types of courses could fall into place there. On days 1 and 2, the 6th graders would eat lunch at the first lunch, which here begins at 10:25. So we do tend to call that first lunch brunch, but it's about the same time that the high school students eat their first lunch as well. Then after lunch, there is another unified art or foreign language, depending on the schedule for that day, and then the 2 other core subjects in the afternoon of the 2 blocks. And grade 7 is similar, but as you can see, they have their unified arts in the morning on days 1 and 2, and they have their blocks in a row with a lunch break in the middle. And grade 8. Now this doesn't have to be exact, but these were examples that we wanted to put in for you to see the flow. Okay? So this is a sample grade 6 schedule for, I guess you could say, a typical kid in the middle school coming into 6th grade that may have selected Spanish and may not be a performing arts member of one of the performing arts groups. So you can see that they have science, after advisory, they have science and math. Then they would go off to health, have lunch, have Spanish, which would be the introductory course in the 6th grade, and then they would have social studies and English language arts. But as you can see, when they move to day 3 and 4, their unified arts change. So 2 days in a row, they will now have music, which is the general music course, and art. And then their course subjects are a little bit later in the morning with the lunch break. And the 5-6, as you can see as well, they are heavier in the morning for the 2 days. And one of the other things you may have noted in the presentation is the lunch changes every 2 days. So that can be a good thing, again, that whole time of day. And then it could also be a fair thing because not everybody has to eat last lunch every day. But we do have to work out a few little obstacles and challenges with that because that is a very late lunch, and we would hope to institute a healthy working snack, which we currently have with the 8th grade, that's working quite well at their beginning of their 9:05 block. Currently, they take down their assignment, they might do their do now, or their warm-up, and they're eating their apple, let's say, or they might be having a yogurt, something like that. And it's not disruptive, and the students have handled it wonderfully and responsibly.
That's a little bit of, are we holding questions till the end, Superintendent Chairman Kane? Hold it. I
Sure,
apologize.
that's quite all right. We're going to be going through quickly. These are just samples. So the next slide is a grade 7 sample schedule, just so you can see how it's changed up just a little bit. This particular student has tech ed and Spanish, and this particular student happens to be in a performing arts group. So 2 days out of the cycle, they will be having their band rehearsal class in the school day, which is kind of important to us, and they happen to have it for a double block, which is going to be beneficial when you talk about getting instruments ready, getting seats ready, music ready, and really using that time well to get ready for performances and to learn their craft. The next slide is a grade 8 sample, and this happens to be a student who might be on an educational plan, who might be a special education student, noting that they would have perhaps a learning center built into their schedule, or perhaps it might be a service, such as speech and language, 2 times out of the cycle. And we do have a little flexibility here. It does say here that the Learning Center would meet days 3 and 4, 2 in a row. We could spread that out. We have the flexibility that perhaps one might be on the day 1 and then might be in the middle of the cycle on the day 3. So it's a little bit more spread out for any long-term projects, organization, some of the goals that students are working on their IEPs. So there is flexibility, and there is flexibility that, of course, they can also participate in our unified arts, especially performing arts, which is important for them to have that outlet and that chance to shine as well in those areas. Okay? So as you can see through many of these slides, we came up with the advantages that we find with this proposal. And if you look very closely, they very much align with the priorities from the think tank, almost identically. There is no way I think that you could get every single thing that you ever wanted in a particular schedule. Something always has to give, but we came up with all of these items that we see as advantages. And Although there are some changes, which we'll talk about in the next slide, it does have a wide offering of unified arts classes, although they may meet twice a cycle instead of 6. And there are areas where kids can get support if needed in reading comprehension, and those kids who may be able to move on successfully and study a language as a major subject, I guess you could say, can get into the meat of the language and prepare for a high school course. The next slide talks about the changes, next 2 slides actually, and these are some things that we've discussed not only with the staff, we've reviewed these advantages and changes and obstacles with the secondary curriculum cabinet, which is all of our CTLs and our high school principal, and also with the leadership team and Mrs. Benton. So we've presented at all of those, to all of those groups, and let them see what we've been up to. So the changes mostly here is in minutes. The core academic minutes now meet for 240 minutes a day, which was our goal, and that's up from 196 minutes. And we have reduced the unified arts time from 98 minutes a day to 90 minutes a day. Phys ed does still meet all year long, but only 2 times a cycle instead of 3. And they're coming up from elementary and intermediate school having phys ed once a week. We think this is still a great opportunity to have the kids being active. Performing arts also meets 2 times a week now instead of 3, but as you noticed in that double block, it's advantageous for those groups. Foreign language is reduced to 2 times a cycle. That is a big change for us. And that is something that we've talked to the CTL of foreign language about. We've talked to Mrs. Burnham, and we feel that we had a charge, the goal was met in the core subject areas, and we don't have enough minutes to give away. We have a school day that we have to work within. We have parameters. So this is one of the places that there was a large change. We talked about announcements and the pledge very briefly, as they are now, done at the beginning of the advisory block, and then the advisor would get to the business of organizing students and centering students for the day, and do you have what you need, and what is your goal for today to get to your classes. And they'll be working on some goal setting, short-term and long-term as well. A couple of other changes that we need to talk about. Students, when they select courses, we do have a course selection process that would happen later in the spring as usual. They would really have to select whether they wanted to be a performing arts track, and if they did that, they may not have access to visual arts, which is our art class where they learn a lot. So they kind of have to make a choice because it is a lot of time to be part of an ensemble and a performance group. Computer literacy is embedded within the content areas and supported by the integration specialists. We talked about that a little bit earlier, and originally when I had given some information about some of the frequently asked questions, I had mentioned that we would have hopefully 1 technology integration specialist per grade level. I think that with equity and the model that we're moving to as a district, it would really be more as 1 technology integration specialist for each level. So the high school would have a technology integration specialist, we would maintain one of the technology integration specialists, and the elementary would have one, which they had had a few years ago, but I believe that was grant funded, and now we would be able to perhaps reinstate that. So we would know what the kids were getting for exposure and experiences when they come up in the 6th grade. Couple of other changes. Engineering, technology education would be offered in grades 7 and 8 as opposed to 6, 7, and 8. However, that would allow us to have our engineering integration in the math and the science classes in the 7th and the 8th grade for a broader STEM focus. So those teachers who teach technology education would then be able to go co-teach on a particular standard or content area within the math class or within the science class when those topics come up. Health will be offered in the 6th and the 8th grade, so we would have to do some work on adjusting our curriculum to make sure all units and topics and standards are covered. And then, as we have talked for several years in a row, writing across the curriculum is a high priority at the middle school. We've done an awful lot of professional development and training, and we would want to develop a writing workshop class so that the students are writing about lots of different types of writing in different styles and about different types of literature pieces. And I mentioned that the lunches do rotate every 2 days. We talked a little bit about this at the staff meeting the other day on Monday, which unfortunately had been postponed due to the blizzard. And we had a teacher who taught in another district, and she had a similar schedule to this. And it was concerning that things are changing a lot, and some days might be heavier than others with some of the core subjects in a row, and how that would be for an 11-year-old, a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old. And she mentioned something that was pretty right on, and that was that the kids adjusted, you know. After a few weeks, after a month, the kids adjusted. They knew which days were their heavy days. It's kind of like now, in their mind, what day is tomorrow? It's a blue day. Oh, I have phys ed. I have to remember my phys ed clothes. Or I have to remember my trumpet because tomorrow's band. Once they get into a routine, they would adjust and they would know, okay, I know Thursday and Friday are going to be my heavy days, or I know that I have to bring my snack because I have late lunch on those days. So we also maintain that school-wide calendar on the website that I know a lot of the parents and families work from, and it may be on several refrigerators in town because of that blue day, white day right now, and when they need their instrument after a long weekend, after a snow day, and they keep track to make sure that they're prepared when they come to school. So we're hoping that that will work, and we also know that, as Mrs. Benton said, change can be difficult and sometimes maybe even a little bit more challenging for the adults as opposed to the students. And that's something that we do anticipate with just change. We've changed the schedule 5 years ago, and now we're looking to tweak this and make it happen. So the obstacles and challenges that we see that are quite major is adjusting to this new format. The advisory piece alone, we would have to develop that model and make it structured so that students were receiving similar experiences across the building with that support and that trust building and those connections. And we have some ideas of how we're going to move that forward and develop that by visiting some of the other schools in addition to Westford and really seeing it in action, and then perhaps offering some Wilmington University opportunities early in the spring or early in the summer for the teachers to really come up with what they see as the best model. So structuring that piece is important. And some of our part-time employees, certainly we will have to work around some schedules. We share some staff with the high school and with some of the intermediate and elementary schools, so we would have to tweak that to make sure everybody is accommodated, a difficult task. And the impact on the high school foreign language program. And this one was an important one for me. As many of you know, I'm a former foreign language teacher, and I did get my start in the 7th grade at the West with Ms. Nowak, and that made me motivated and inspired to become a foreign language teacher. They will still have that exposure, but we have to be concerned about, as a 9th grader, what skills do they come up to the high school with, and can they perform at, let's say, a Spanish 2 honors level or a French 2 honors level. We may have to really work closely together over the next couple of years to make sure that we have that particular track for certain students who excel. And the last quick slide is our timeline, which had shifted just a bit, as I mentioned, due to snow. But we are hoping, after your review of this, and certainly any questions that we can answer for you, and after a second review, perhaps at the end of the month having a parent night, which we have done previously, to really share this information with parents and have them be able to wrap their heads around it. It is a lot of information to digest all at once. You do sometimes have to take a couple of looks at it and then try to say, oh, that makes sense now. And we're open, of course, to questions on that evening as well. Then hopefully explain things to the students just after April vacation so that they can get a preview of what their schedule would look like when they come back to school in August. And we hope, which is right around the same time that we typically do things, to have our course selections in order to be distributed to students by May 1st. And then we collect those probably 2.5 to 3 weeks later, and then enter everything into the computer. So I appreciate you taking the time. I know you've had this presentation for a bit and been able to really review it closely, and I appreciate your time this evening. But if you have questions that you would like to ask, we're happy to answer them. It's taken us several months to wrap our heads around all of the information.
Thank you, that was an excellent presentation. Every time, I'm not speaking for the committee, but for myself, every time we get more information, first of all, I get more questions, but then I get more answers, so.
Right,
It's, and we have to keep in mind here, I don't think we've undergone, at least not since I've been on the committee, such a major change that we're all invested in. And so our questions aren't meant to put in obstacles at all. They're meant that we really want to make sure that we make the right choices and that we support as a committee the right choices.
And that you have a full understanding.
Understanding what the
Absolutely.
choices mean. Yes, thank you. So, would somebody like to go first? Dr. Quick?
Let me begin by, first of all, saying that I am, as a school committee member, and seeing, this was a little bit confusing for me at first. And I say that coming from the fact that I'm from Reading. I used to be on a 6-day schedule. So this is something that is not totally new to me to see. I did have a few questions. I'm not going to lie, I'm definitely, the decrease in the foreign languages really bothers me because I would really like to push to see foreign language at a much younger age than that. So the fact that that's decreasing is something I'm definitely going to have a difficulty getting over. But that being said, I understand that clearly it's, you only have so many hours and we have to fill it as best as possible. Looking at that first advisory period, I keep hearing this advisory period, but to me, as I'm looking at it, I'm just seeing glorified homeroom. Can you expound upon that a little bit more, because I'm not getting it?
No, it's a very good point. And really, when we went to visit Stony Brook up in Westford, that was something that the team came back and shared with us at the think tank, and they were very animated, very excited about it, and explained it to us. And then doing some research, which we would have to do further research, it is a very middle school-like concept, and that is really engaging each and every student. We do have class sizes of 19, 24, 25, and it is a very large school. So the teams certainly help us out by making a little mini family or a school within a school. But to get to know each and every kid, their strengths and weaknesses, how to connect with them, that is the idea for that period. It is not a busy period. It is not going to be a homework period. It is going to be a time where a curriculum about study skills, organizational skills is delivered. The curriculum will already be preset. On occasion, we do expect to use that advisory perhaps on a monthly basis. We say to the teachers, by the end of the first month of September of school, we would like you have to use several of the advisory blocks to complete 2 of our second step lessons, which again reinforce our character education, and everybody's coming together in a small group to talk about their experiences of what they would do if perhaps they were in a bullying situation, if perhaps they were a witness or a bystander, or maybe on the receiving end of some bullying. That's just one of the pieces of the lessons, but we hope to have it be multi-use, but it will not be a study hall. It will not be a homework period. It will be engaged time on learning.
So it'd be structured, I'm sorry.
Correct.
I just wanted to add, for the general audience, New England Associations in Schools and Colleges accreditation has that as a requirement now at the high school level, an advisor-advisee program. Actually, I frankly think it's better at the middle school level, so I'm thrilled that we're starting it out at the middle school level. But now it's a requirement that all schools have to have if they want to get accreditation.
Okay, so this is something a little bit more, again, like I said, in my head, I'm not thinking that there was going to be any structure necessarily
No,
to this.
there would have to be structure because, as I mentioned, we would want every student to be having a similar experience in building that connection with the adult, building the connection with the other 12 or so students in the room, and learning other tools to help make them successful and move forward.
How is the announcements, you said during that time, announcements are going to be also allowed to be given. Is that going to be disruptive?
I think that what we do now, we have our homeroom at 7:20. It happens to be a 7-minute period. And we rarely use that entire 7 minutes. Typically, the morning announcements with the pledge, a moment of silence, and small announcements, and our word of the week, 3 minutes usually. And so the rest of the time would be dedicated to that advisory model. And I think it'll be important to note that, since we are here in almost March, and depending on your review of the entire proposal, we can, of course, now be doing our planning for bringing in some training and professional development for the teachers on how to run a successful advisory program, because there are many successful ones out there. So we could be working now or very soon to make sure that that is in place for very early August, very early September. So once they receive the curriculum, they would then be able to know the purpose and understand what we're all getting behind.
And then one more question,
Yes,
sorry.
go ahead.
The other concern I have is, for me, and my experience is middle school was a time where I got to experience a little of everything to let me decide as I went on and got older, what I wanted to focus my attentions on. It seems to me that according to the schedule, children already have to make that decision as to whether they're going to be in performing arts or in visual arts, rather than getting a little piece of each and then choosing. Am I correct in that?
I think that, you could see both perspectives. I think we still have a great offering, but I do think that some people have mentioned it might be early to take that choice. But we already know the students who are coming up from the 5th grade who are involved in strings, band, and continue on with chorus. So they have kind of already made that choice. We have had debates of how early it is to select which language that they'd like to study over the course of the 3 years, that it's kind of early at the end of 5th grade to make that commitment. But there's always the possibility of a future study of a different language or changing languages once they arrive at the high school. So you make a point that they have to sort of lock in, I guess you could say, at the 6th grade level. Most of our kids do that now, with the exception of the visual arts piece.
Yeah, because there's no performance arts in the intermediate schools. Am I correct on that? I don't believe so. There's
They have strings and
strings,
bands
yes, but I'm
and
saying
band.
Yeah.
there's strings, there's band, but I'm talking about more the arts and things like that. There's no real avenues for them to experience performance or visual arts. So that's.
Well, they have visual art, they have art in the elementary grade.
I guess
They don't
I'm
have-
seeing
they
more
don't have,
performance.
performing art. We don't have it in the middle school
No.
either.
Some other middle schools do have a drama elective, let's say. We don't have that. We have not had that.
All right, thank you.
Does anyone have any, Mr. Mullis?
Yeah, my concern is also with a foreign language. As our world is getting smaller, I think that's very important for students to learn a foreign language. And I guess that the concern I have is their skill set going into high school, with that time being reduced. How is that being handled once they get to that level?
I think that's something that we have to take a look at over the next 2 years, when we would then feed students up to the 9th grade, and we would have to work with the high school teachers and the CTL to find out what a student would need to achieve, perhaps on an exit exam, in order to meet the criteria for an honors course. Not every student right now moves on to the 2 honors or the French 2 honors. There are some students that move to a different level, and there are some students that don't have the foundations grasped quite yet, and they repeat Spanish 1 over, or perhaps they change languages. So it would be a work in progress. I couldn't tell you right now what we're going to do about that. That is definitely one of our challenges that we will face, of what type of student with what type of skills in the language, writing, speaking, listening, when we go on to 9th grade. And we would have to work very closely with Mrs. Beckwith.
Superintendent Benton?
Although I know this is very hard to hear, I say this every time we have this conversation, there is no research out there that says a student who has 3 years of foreign language in the middle school is going to do better than a student who enters freshman year. So all the students new to Wilmington High freshman year who take a foreign language do just as well, and sometimes better, than the students who've had 3 years of foreign language. If you truly support foreign language being an integral part of the students, it has to start in kindergarten. But starting in 6th grade is not giving the kids an advantage. So I know people don't like hearing it, but that's the truth. That's the research out there. There's no difference. So even though it makes us feel good, and we think there is a difference, there is no statistical difference in how kids do in foreign language in the high school. Now, if we had a grant that we could, I mean, my druthers would be to start it in kindergarten, frankly, but we don't have the money to do that. That would be really offering a global education
And
to our
that's where the
students.
research is, that says it's successful.
Yeah,
that
and
they
that shows-
retain it.
Mr. Mullis, we finished
I'm
for now?
finished. That was my
Okay.
question.
Mr. Hayes?
I'm actually going to be positive tonight, and
Always positive.
so well, after hearing that summer reading assignment, I'm very excited. So you got me on a good night.
I've read it.
As a
I'll
fellow
tell you.
librarian, I really liked what I heard, and I hosted Jay Atkinson in my library. Matter of fact, he's a wonderful speaker. Highly recommend him. Read both his books. Did not read the Jack Kerouac book yet. Okay, so when you, and I prepared my statement. So back in the fall, when you were presenting your MCAS results, I made a promise to you and all the administrators that if you came back to the school committee and needed us to take some sort of action in order to improve student achievement at your schools, that I would support it. So I'm certainly inclined to support your proposal. Certainly out of respect to all the other members, I want to hear what all the other members have to say, take that into consideration, maybe get some feedback from the community, but I'm certainly inclined to support. And also, increasing the length of core subject classes was in your school improvement plan either last year or the year before. So while the school committee no longer formally votes on those and approves those, I certainly supported it. So this is a long time coming as far as I'm concerned. And so, you know, minutes matter, and so I know that for the 4 core subjects, we're going from 49 minutes to 60 minutes, so that's 11 minutes extra per core class, and there's 180 school days, and so that's 11 times 180 gets you to 1,980 minutes, and then if you divide that by 60, that actually calculates out to 33 extra hours every year for math, for English, for science, and for social studies, and that's without changing the length of the school day or the length of the school year. And another way to do it is if you take that 1,980 minutes number and you divide it by 49, which is what the existing class time is, that actually calculates out to 40 extra classes per core subject per year. So, and again, that's presumably without costing the district any money or much money, and it doesn't lengthen the school day or the school year. And so, you know, you certainly have my support, and I always hesitate to say these numbers, because 2 years ago, I listed a couple of MCAS numbers, and there was a gentleman in the audience, and he's been throwing them back at me for the past 2 years. But I'm gonna just mention one of the numbers. I'm just gonna mention one. So our 8th grade MCAS scores for science, 63% fall into the needs improvement or the warning/failure category. So, I mean, clearly, you know, something needs to be done. And obviously, it's not just how much time, it's what you do with that time. But I trust, based on all the professional development I keep hearing about, and just the trained, you know, the excellent personnel you have on staff, you know, that I'm sure, given extra time, given 33 extra hours every year per core subject, that I'm sure we'll see improvements in those 4 core subjects. All that said, I absolutely agree with what Manny and Dr. Quick said regarding foreign language. But again, I certainly understand what Superintendent Benton is saying. And as you said at the onset, there's only so many minutes to go around. So you have to weigh all the benefits versus all the pros versus all the cons. And, you know, less phys ed, less performing arts, a lot less foreign language, making the kids choose between performing arts and visual arts, no health in 7th grade. You know, there are some significant changes. And so, you know, I think I'm going to support the measure, but I certainly recognize where other folks are coming from. So, but I want to thank you for the presentation. I think it's wonderful. And I think I emailed about 15 questions. I already got the responses, so I'm not going to ask the same questions over again. So I just thank you very much.
No problem.
Okay, Mrs. Carroll?
I just want to know, for the students in the class, the ratio, is it going to change any from last year to this year?
I think that based on our enrollment, as I mentioned, we are declining in our enrollment, so we do anticipate about 847, 850 students next year, which is a bit less. We do anticipate with this model, even moving to the 4 core subjects being longer, that we will maintain our class size. Depending on each grade and the numbers coming in, we would have 23 students on average in the core subjects, 24 students, and we really want to maintain 25 and less. And right now, our class sizes, as Mrs. Benton has mentioned in the past, specifically at the 6th grade level, are quite excellent, and they're 13, 17, and with our reduced enrollment and other reductions that might be coming forth, we've really had to take a close look at that. But we do not anticipate classes over 25. And in some cases, they might be right on average at 23.
Okay. Thank you.
And 25 to 1 is the preferred in the contract.
Thank you. Mrs. Burns?
I've been waiting for this because can't even begin to tell you how much I've been crunching on this since I got the packet. Let me just comment that I want to thank the whole team for working so hard, because comes by no easy measure, and it does take a lot of creativity in coming up with such an extensive plan. I have to say, I think this is something, whether it be next year or whenever, this is something that I think we do need to look for, and we do need to move forward. Being that said, in this stage, there's a lot of things that I need to crunch on. And it's the detail aspects. And so if you can, I understand it, but I'm not by any means proficient. So if you give me, and my members of the school committee, give me some patience as I try to articulate my thoughts. My biggest concern is, I've got multi, so bear with me, and I'm going to try to keep this concise and in 1, 2, 3 measures. But my concern are the students with these the schedule changes, and looking at Stony Brook. That's one of my concerns. Stony Brook, as well as I think it's Andover. I got a copy of a similar schedule that they went to, actually 90-minute for their core, and thus doing a lot less without the unified pieces in their program. And but what I notice, all across the board, is their lunches remain the same, which, in the impact of the 6-day schedule and having lunches alternate, there are a lot of students in the district, special ed, but also those who are part of the general education process on 504s, and those who aren't, not to say that, I mean, the rigidity is a rainbow of it, but that the alternating time changes, especially with lunch, is a concern, because schedules are everything with keeping them on task. And since a lot of children, even at this age, still struggle with organization, that responsibility of independence with regards to that, having the lunches just staggered every other day does cause a large disruption for those who need that rigid structure in their school day. The other aspect that I have as well is that you spoke to phys ed. Now, with considering all that we've done with regards to some state mandated with regards to the foods coming into our cafeterias and what type of foods we can fundraise with, and all that structure, as well as the health and wellness piece, as well as getting to the point that we're measuring our students' BMI, which, for the record, I'm not a big proponent of the BMI factor, and I'm in the medical field for 20 plus years. I don't believe in it. But anyway, that said, to take away that physical ed piece and having it kind of, I know you have it at least once a week, a lot of those same typical kids look to that movement piece. And you say that because, they're coming in from the North and West schools with that one piece already. It's not kind of apples to apples, because what I see is the North and West, they have recess. So they're out every day. So that physical education piece is only an added benefit to allow them to get back into their classrooms, to focus and concentrate on those things that they might be struggling, especially in that period of when they're going from learning to read to reading to learn aspect. And you hope that they navigate that by the time they're in the middle school. So taking all of this in consideration, I was wondering, and I think Mary Hood could probably, I'm sure this came up, with that aspect alone, what has been discussed with the think tank as to how to support those kids with this transition? And it'll be a long-term transition as opposed to they'll get used to it after a month or two, because it doesn't work that way. Because there's a lot more involved, and this is going to really impact, as I see it, to part of that group of students, the special ed especially, with further accommodations, and it can, make the difference between children going from 504s to IEPs because of the significance of the changes to that schedule and the phys ed piece and that aspect. as well as, and let me add to this, those children who don't learn in the typical method with regards to the visual arts piece, sometimes kids go through alternative paths to be able to focus on, because art, as taken for one example, actually falls into the history piece. It falls into the math piece and the science piece. And those are components besides the historical factors of that, but just the different mediums that class can inspire kids. And it can lend towards creativity, imagination, critical thinking skills, and just themselves, besides the self-esteem piece, which adds to it, just themselves in their own environment, in their own world. It opens up that perspective. And sometimes some kids need that path in order to be able to access the ELA and the math and the science and the social studies. So I know you don't have anything in black and white and nothing's in, but I'd like to hear some thoughts from you as to what was discussed and some of the areas as to how to support these kids in that transition, because it is a significant transition.
Right.
More impact than
Right.
others, yeah.
And we talked about this a little bit in the fact that, 7th and 8th graders, of course, will struggle because they know one way and then they will have to change. It may be a little bit easier, and I can't say that for sure, for 6th graders. They're transitioning to a bigger building, but it will be the first and only schedule that they know at the middle school. So that piece was discussed in the fact that some kids will have a bit of a difficult time because they're going to be thinking of the old schedule. We certainly understand kids who need routines and who need that structure, and also who need that outlet in phys ed to get some of their energies out to then be able to focus. We work with those kids day in and day out, and on occasion may even give them double gym because they excel there, and that's a place they can shine, and it's something that's going to help their day be successful. So we certainly have been flexible in the past and perhaps can be creative, as you mentioned, in how we support the students. We did not have an awful lot of discussion about specific groups of students and how we would support them with the change of the rotations. We thought a lot about the teachers adjusting to those rotations, because some people are very set in their ways and have had the same lunch for the past 6 years and will be very hungry if they don't have the same lunch. But we haven't gotten to those in-depth discussions about supporting students with special needs and accommodations, because we're looking at the whole group, and then we would be able to tweak things individually for their plans of what they need.
I just want to be clear when I speak. I'm not just speaking to those with special needs, because that's an obvious.
Yeah.
I'm also speaking to those on 504s, which is general ed.
Sure.
As well as those who might not be on 504s, but are struggling and are with the way it is now, because there is some structure and there's some, when you're having lunch, you know what I mean? And I do believe with you in the sense that you get used to the routine, and but sometimes they still struggle with that, because
sure.
I work on a 5-day schedule, and I admire these kids and teachers to be able to be, just so adept to, like, okay, this is day such and such. So I didn't grow up with a 6-day schedule. So, but I just want to be clear, and I think before I feel. There's other questions I have for you, but before I feel comfortable, I'd like to say a little bit more. I know there's a lot that you have to do, but before I vote to it, I'd like to have a little bit more concrete plan. Some of the points that, specific points that were talked to, not that you have to agree to it, but some of the areas as to how we can do, that you can do it in this, as we roll this out, in that aspect.
I think I can potentially answer a little bit of the question on how basically, my understanding of your question is how come the lunches move, and how we support the kids when the lunches move, because it's not routine, or it's not as routine as it is now. We did talk about lunches specifically, because it's kind of a big deal. It's their only social time during the day. They gotta eat by 10:30. I'm starving. I get it. We made the lunches move for a very specific reason, and it was not on the list of priorities, but it was talked about. The flexible scheduling. So specifically, if you have your science and math class block, if the lunch is in between those classes, that flexible scheduling is no longer flexible. Because they can't then say, I need an hour and a half, I need 75 minutes, because at minute 60, the kids would have to leave to go to lunch. And so that was a concern among the teachers in the think tank, that having that split class with lunch in the middle totally disrupts the flow of that class, particularly and specifically with testing. Is like, so you give half a test, the kids all go to lunch. How much of the remaining part of the test is valid then? They've all talked to each other because they just had their own social time in the day. So that is the logistical reason to have the lunches move. And we made a decision. And you got to give a little to get a little.
Mm-hmm. And to that point, then, let me ask you this. That, in some capacity, also works towards some children being able to access the curriculum, A. Secondly, with that flexible scheduling, and especially because I had somebody explain to me this aspect, so please clarify. Don't take it the wrong way, because I'm learning from you. I've been a student all my life. With that flexible scheduling piece, and from what I understand, that's in this other district, and I think it's Andover, forgive me, I'm not quite sure, that because it's flexible, that if, let's say, science has a lab that they want to do with the kids, and they might be looking for an extra time, and that the social studies teacher said, well, you know something, I'm giving a quiz. So you can take this 15 minutes of time, because of the back-to-back block, take this 15 minutes at a time, and all I need is this block of time to administer my test, and it works for them. They work in groups of 5 or 6, and, across the board. Same thing with holidays that land on Mondays, or holidays that land on Friday. They can tweak their day a little bit to accommodate for quizzes, extended need for time and things like that. Wouldn't that too play into that flexible scheduling piece? Or has that been considered?
I honestly, I don't understand your question, I'm sorry.
I'm just saying, besides the, from what it sounds, and please clarify for me if I'm not understanding it right and I'm misinterpreting it, that the reason for the lunches, sporadic throughout the 6-day cycle, is to accommodate for flexible time with the teachers.
To allow those 2 blocks to happen back to back.
Right. You risk students struggling and not accessing the curriculum because of this piece. And I'm speaking generally. I'm not speaking, I'm not pointing fingers specifically. But you're going to have that aspect because of what I mentioned earlier with rigidity with schedules and expectations of their days and blah, blah, blah. But along with that flexible scheduling rainbow, that teachers have, some teachers in different districts are using that flexible scheduling piece, when they meet, to discuss their schedules with regards to, and maybe I'm missing the point here, that if, let's say, the science teacher has a lab that they want to do, that's going to extend beyond the 60 minutes of their class, but it's back-to-back with, let's say, social studies. That social studies can kind of sometimes, in those meetings, and I might be missing the point.
I think I understand where our disconnect is.
Okay.
The plan in place, as we propose it, is to pardon the wording, but that's what the schedule people call it, pod the kids together in groups of 50, let's say.
Okay.
So 50 kids will be scheduled into math and science.
Right.
So 25 in math, 25 in science for period 1. Period 2, those sets of 25 kids will switch.
Yep.
So the math and science, we align the math and the science together in a STEM block, if you will, of 2 hours.
Right.
And then we align the ELA and social studies into a humanities block of 2 hours. So the flexible schedule comes so say there's 100 kids on a team, 50 kids have math and science in the first 2-hour block, and then that 50 kids has humanities, social studies and language arts in the second 2-hour block. So the flexible scheduling, it's done by discipline, if you will. So not that the social studies and science teacher wouldn't be encouraged to work together, but the more natural, if you will, fit would be the math and the science. So it was important to make sure that those blocks, the math and science, stay together in a 2-hour chunk of time that did not get interrupted. And that's not possible to do at least in any way that we've been able to discover, without having the lunches move. I think your point is well taken, that it is going to be a difficult adjustment for kids, especially kids who are in the building, but I think the addition to the working snack into all 3 grade levels will help with that. And also, once the routine of the non-routine, if you will,
I understand.
becomes the norm, it just becomes the norm, and that's what it is, and people kind of do it.
We actually instituted a waterfall schedule last spring when we did our MCAS testing, so that the same classes wouldn't be missed every morning when the MCAS testing was going on. And we put up signs, we made announcements in the morning, and we posted the rooms where they were, and the kids fell into place for 2 days at a time during their testing. It was tricky, but they enjoyed it. So I'm not quite sure I understand fully your question. I know you have your head wrapped around the flexible scheduling piece. I can understand where you see the connections. And there are some teams in certain middle schools that have 4 blocks of time, and they can use it however they want between the 4 of them. We've managed to only work with a 2-person block at this time.
Well, I understand, and I get it, and I think as you work on that, it might be more clearer for me. My biggest concern is the transition with students and those who require more supports, and across the board, and not just one area of our students. With regards to that, and I guess I'm cautious until I think I hear a little bit more concrete plan as to how it's, as you roll this out, you're going to support these students for the smoothest transitions with the less impact to their day, that will allow them to pick up this new schedule and not hinder their learning, which is it's one of my main
Points.
when you get to
want
the
their-
bottom of it, that's my main point.
Got it.
I do have to ask you now, a couple of things are that now that teachers are being given this additional time, okay? What's the plan with regards to the use of that time, that additional 10 minutes? Yes.
Well, I think that that's important to note, that we have to make sure that teachers are utilizing that time. Our worst possible fear, and something that I don't foresee happening because we had increased already 5 years ago, is that teachers teach the 49, 50 minutes and then they let the kids start their homework. That's the worst case scenario, because the minutes need to be used for direct instruction, making connections with kids making connections with one another. So it will be perhaps more training, but most of our teachers who excel in managing their time and planning don't plan a 49-minute block with just one activity. They plan at least 3 activities, from a warm-up to an introduction to a new topic, to practice, maybe practice in partners or practice in group, then some check-in with the teacher. So there are multiple activities that would be expected to be planned during that 60 minutes, so that students are not receiving one mode of instruction only, and that they are using their critical thinking skills to change gears and to transition to then apply their knowledge to perhaps a new task.
So would that be the motivating factor for those teachers to, I'm imagining that some classrooms are more successful than others when it comes to these areas. What's going to change for those who struggle with regards to that? Will they be given these new a structure of which to work within, as you've just mentioned? Is that going to be expected of them?
I think that we'll have to utilize our staff meeting time, our CIT time, to really make sure that teachers are understanding the full expectation that those 60 minutes are to be used with direct instruction for students.
And how are you going to collect data with regards to the measures as to how the teachers are teaching and how the students are learning? What type of data will you be taking with regards to that to see if this is a successful venture?
Well,
Yeah, thank you.
I'll respond to that because it happens to be coincidental with the new evaluation system, which is data-driven. So we have to collect data from teachers on student success. And
will it be grades as well as MCAS scores, which will be the determining
it'll be more
data?
than, it'll be more than just MCAS. It'll be more than just MCAS that we will be determining. We're still in negotiations over the language, but it's a good time if you're going to do a change. This actually would be beneficial because of the new evaluation system. As far as your other question about the sort of more rigid student, whether it be general ed or special ed, I will ask Mary Hood to talk with the special ed staff, and we'll come up with
I'd just be interested to see what
a list of what, the
impact it-
responses.
yeah,
I
okay.
think, it's interesting because we sometimes have grave concerns about students and change, and they're the most adaptable in most cases. So and Mary did come up with a whole list of positives of how this new schedule would be supportive for special education students and students on 504. So I will share that with you electronically,
Thank
and
you.
we will add the social emotional in the lunch piece.
Yep.
Okay?
So instruction will probably change then? To a
Absolutely.
little bit, okay.
I think the idea is that it's constantly evolving with feedback from curriculum team leaders, feedback from building administrators who are going in, who are doing walkthroughs, who are doing observations, and who are doing summative evaluations.
And hopefully, it's going to be more project-based, which is great for
What
all
we're gearing
kids.
towards, exactly. Can I ask, and I spoke to Mrs. Benton with regards to this as well, and please guide me. We'll be talking to this as our next item, but I was wondering, and this is probably going to you, Mrs. Benton, what would need to be done, I'm not holding you to the letter of the law, with regards to possibly seeing if we could do something similar. I emailed you on this with regards to MCAS prep, seeing the possibility of offering additional prep courses. It'd be an after-school for a fee. Where do we start with trying to find out if it's going to be financially feasible for parents, and if that, how do we look towards it? Do we do a focus group to see if that's something parents would want, or?
Mrs. Burnham could do a survey with the middle school parents. It's interesting because any Woburn Street parents? There's a walking program, pedometer program going on at the Woburn Street with students, and parents are asked to purchase pedometers, and I think 2/3 of the school parents purchased them for the kids. So, and they weren't inexpensive. I'm trying to think, Minnie, do you remember how much they were?
Yeah, my wife used to.
Okay. But I think that, as with, Peters could tell you with SAT prep, if parents see an interest, a need for it, they're willing to pay it, and there's always scholarships. We certainly could run MCAS
I'm just saying with
programs
regards to the
if
impact
it were
of
by fee.
grants and things of that sort, if that's something that,
I will tell you this, you, being you as the school committee for many, many years, has spoiled the community because they have not had to pay for anything. So when you do bring up a program for a fee, everybody responds negatively. And I say that because with the whole, everyone was asking for a middle school, after-school program. And we did a survey about buses, late bus, would they be willing to pay 2 days a week for the bus? No, people didn't want to do that, so.
I also think, though, too, the landscape of available monies to public educations, whether it be through federal, state grants, or other private companies, I think that landscape has significantly changed in this economy, and so those funds are not there, and there's no grants to write because there's no grants that exist. So I think, it's not something I have to, but if it's something parents feel strongly about, especially in the nature of how MCAS is going, and I'm happy to hear that the state is reviewing the MCAS testing piece and revamping it, hopefully it'll be for the better, that I think it's something we could at least try to, especially in stepping off the middle school aspect that you're proposing.
But
And
we
it might
could
be-
look at it because, I mean, we used to run one in the third grades after school paid for, but we couldn't afford it this year. And actually, Woodland Street parents came forward, wanted to do it anyway, with by fee. It was too late to get the number of weeks in and do the program. So I think you're right. If there's a strong interest in it, people will support it.
I guess we could discuss it at the...
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much for everything, folks.
Mrs. Bonish?
I mean, I didn't
I just
ask
have
any
a couple of
questions.
questions. You did ask one of mine. So with the foreign language, is it still going to be for 3 years but fewer times? Is that it? It's not,
Yes.
they're not getting rid of it in 6th grade, right?
We're not. That was one of the priorities, that if we had to go that route, we would stick with it, but we were able to accommodate the introductory program in the 6th grade. They have a space for it.
Okay. Also, Kathleen asked this, but I didn't really get the answer. So the class size, what is the current class size, the average?
The average is probably 22.
Okay, so it's not really going up that much if the average
It's
is
going
22.
up, but it's not going up
Yeah.
drastically.
Okay.
And it's staying within the ratio that we believe is appropriate,
Okay.
with 25 and under.
Okay. And on the schedule, my only concern about the schedule is this day 5 and 6. Is this set in stone? Like, is this the schedule? That day 5 and 6 where there's 5 hours of instruction with no break?
For 2 days out of
Right,
the
for
6
2 days, but
Yeah.
still, that's a long time.
Each grade would have 2 days of that.
I have a concern with that.
And all your tests would be on those 2 days.
I mean, that would be something that the kids would just dread. I know that they'd get used to it, but that's a long
But
time.
not only would they get used to it, and pardon me for saying it this way, but the kids have that now.
Really?
I mean, if you think about it, every class is instruction. So, I guess maybe if you wanted to make an exception for a PE type of class where they're moving.
Yes.
But a health class is instruction, so there's not a break because they have health period 4 for the kids. So I don't know that, I think that's a much less of a significant change for the children who are in school for the 6.5 hours a day being receiving instruction.
But I do consider gym to be a break.
And I would
even though
acknowledge
it's,
that,
you
yeah,
know.
but I would.
It changes it up a bit.
Yeah.
Agreed, and technology education happens to be a little bit more hands-on. Computer literacy, even the general music class, when they're learning to play music on the guitar or learning to play the piano on the keyboard lab, I understand what you're saying. That's at least, it's not considered an academic, but it certainly is, as Terry mentions, instructional time and using their brains and using their thinking skills. But it certainly was a concern. I will admit it was raised also at the staff meeting for certain kids, that is an awful lot of time to go those 4 blocks in a row, plus the unified art. Certainly they have the advisory at the beginning of the day, but we will need to work on the instruction to make sure that students are staying engaged. I mean, we're not hoping that people are sitting there listening to someone speak for those 60 minutes or those 4 blocks in a row. That's not the learning we have now going on at the middle school.
I want to call on Mrs. Burnham. She had something to add here.
To Principal McMillan's point, with the hour-long block of instruction, it would be expected that teachers would appropriately block those minutes out in a way that is conducive to student learning. So you chunk the period out 20 minutes at a time, or 10-minute intro with a longer block in the middle for introduction of new information with practice and application, time at the end of the period to do a summary and wrap up and make connections, assess what the students got out of that learning period. I would agree that if you're envisioning a student arriving at school and moving from one room to the next and sitting in a seat for 60 minutes at a time until it's time to move next door, to sit in a seat for another 60 minutes, that's a really long day. But that's not the day I envision. I envision lots of group work, moving from one activity to another, seat time for the teacher to introduce a mini lesson, moving on to something else, flexible block time with the teacher who shares the pod with you. I see this as an opportunity for a lot of really engaging instruction, that kids will, at the end of an hour, say things like, "Oh, class is already over? I can't believe it went by so fast." That's what happens when you build that kind of engaging instruction. And that's the kind of instructional model that we would be looking to support for teachers through peer modeling and additional professional development.
Okay, and then just one more question. Someone asked about how this would be assessed. So this is a pilot. So how does that work? You do it for a few years and see if it worked, and then what, you reassess and change it again?
We would want feedback, not after the first year. We would want feedback from students, from parents, from the staff, maybe even from you all in hearing from different perspectives what people think about the instruction, about the length of the periods, about the way that we're putting the kids in pods. All of those pieces, we would create some sort of feedback forum so that we could hear from everybody.
And then also the results, the MCAS.
Absolutely.
Really.
Exactly.
Okay.
Mr.
I
Mullis?
have a quick question, and you touched upon it a little bit, but I agree with you, the kids are going to adapt to the changes. They do all the time. What's your concern about the teachers, and how are you going to go about it to, I guess, train them to make these changes?
Sure. I mean, you make a good point, and I mentioned this at the staff meeting on Monday. Believe it or not, the middle school has gone through an awful lot of change in the 12 years, 13 years that it's been open. We already did change the master schedule already once in my second year here, and this is my 6th year here in the district. So they adapted quite well, quite well. This is a bigger change, I would agree with you. So we really have to come together as a school community, as a group of adults, and really use the time that we have together to make it work. And that's going to get everybody on the same page, and that's going to be all through the spring, even over the summer and into the fall. We're going to use all the minutes that we can and even create opportunities over the summer for people to come together and do the work, the hard work that needs to be done to get us ready to be successful. So we have a lot of planning to do. It's going to be a very busy summer.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Mrs. Burns and then Mr. Hayes.
2 questions. Well, I'd be interested in knowing what the staff feedback was.
Sure. I heard comments from a lot of core subject teachers. This is great. This is awesome. I can't wait. I'm so excited. I heard concerns from some of the unified arts teachers. How many sections, how many students will we be having at one time throughout the year? They would be carrying 12 sections of students. Currently, they have 10, 5 classes first semester, 5 classes second semester. They would have 12 classes for the whole year long. I spoke to the performing arts teacher in the band, and she was thrilled that she was going to have the amount of time in that double block. So it was definitely varied. There were concerns about the minutes of teaching time that some teachers would have and the minutes of teaching time that other teachers would have. There was concern about the equity of the advisory and whether or not every teacher would have an advisory group, and that would be true, unless they were less than half-time and they weren't in the building at the time advisory would be happening. So they ranged. There was some very positive feedback, and there was some caution and concern about how will this really look and how will this really feel.
How will you use the unified teachers now by taking that block away? How will they be utilized now? Will their hours be cut, or are we using them at different capacities with a part of the advisory group as well as other areas? How are they going to be utilized now since?
There is a 4.6%
Reduction.
FTE reduction in the budget, which will incorporate pieces of some staff members' there is also an increase at the elementary level in specialist time in order for them to have the block, so there will be movement of teachers to other buildings.
Okay. Oh, good, okay. And the last question I
And,
have.
I forgot to say this, and I should say the most important, is I have to impact bargain with the union.
That was my question.
That was my question.
I'm sorry?
I have to impact bargain with the teachers' union
Okay.
because of the change in working conditions.
That's
So
true.
that also has to happen.
I just have one last question. Can I ask you, and I don't, in getting this think tank together, was there, I mean, I understand the reason to come together as professionals first, but was there a reason not to include any, like a small parent focal group along with this piece, similar to like the school advisory councils, the way that they're run, with regards to, as, you know, strictly as an advisory? I mean, not to put too many chefs in the kitchen, mind you, but just to get a different perspective with regards to what this could mean. I mean, we have a lot of parents who are educators in other districts, which I think would be helpful, and some of them are in this cycle to begin with. So as you structure this and it takes shape, I think it might at least lend itself to the hits and misses that we could possibly try to avoid as we get this up and rolling. Do you know what I mean?
There certainly wasn't a specific design to exclude parents, but I think that what we had thought is if we have the teachers come together and have this investment in this process and the development of this schedule, that the ownership for the improvement that we need to show will come from within that. And so it was getting everybody on the bus and getting in the same direction.
And I have to agree with you. I
The
think
same bus.
The teachers are pinnacle in the success of this schedule going forth. But we also cannot forget the major impact and implication it will be for the goal of seeing student success along with parents' support with that. And I think with this transition, you want to foster that parent participation. I mean, just to get us up going, I'm not saying everyone have an input, everyone, I want this, I want that, but to get that perspective, I think would be healthy, and I think it will feed to that relationship between the school and parents, and continue with the parents supporting it, especially in the transition, especially when and if they see their child struggling at home. You want that type of working relationship that you, and I don't think you can, especially at this, it's a huge change. I think that would be something vital as opposed to, that would contribute to the success of this transition. So I just thought that before everything is written in stone, that might be a good perspective to get before everything goes into black and white.
Mr. Hayes.
So I had two questions, and I now only have one. I was going to ask if anything regarding the schedule had to be negotiated with the unions, and now I know the answer. And but I did ask several of your questions ahead of time, Mrs. Burns, and you're dead on with those questions. And for me, the student always comes first, but the teacher matters too. So when I asked you. Roughly, what was the feedback from the staff? And you kind of, I think it was something, I don't have it in front of me, but it was like maybe half raised their hands in favor, so kind of like a 50-50 split where, that's a little, I wish it was, and I know there was like a straw poll, and, I wish the, oh, you highlighted that. You got that, yeah. Okay. So yeah. So I'd love to see that number rise. I don't know how you do that, but
Sure.
just.
Well, you make a good point, because I think that, you have had some of this material for a while. They had some material that they were able to pre-read before vacation, and Monday was the first time they saw the presentation, and they're still processing and digesting. And I think a lot of people, we've received emails, people have made certain appointments to meet and saying, how would this impact my role? So we're doing some of that work now. And some of them are very logistical questions that once they get the answer, they say, oh, okay. And so it's just a matter of more communication and more of an open forum.
And you're not going to get 100% buy-in because you're changing a program that is going to mean some of their best friends are no longer going to be teaching at the middle school. So it's hard to vote in favor of a program if their friend is going to be transferred to the elementary or to the high school.
Yeah.
I just want to remind everyone, our students are not performing as they should.
Should I read more numbers?
And, yeah, I want us, I don't want us to, we're talking about, I'm hearing these words about drastic changes, huge changes. What we're trying to do is add instructional time to the major content areas because we are not teaching our students to the degree that we should. Our MCAS scores should not be 50% failing or needs improvement. And I'm embarrassed by those scores. And, you know, we've got a secondary high school that does miracles with these kids when it, and turns it around. But these kids should be achieving at a better level.
Right. I completely agree with you, and that's why when you're weighing pros and cons, you have to keep these scores in mind. This is what it's all about, student achievement. So, you give me 4 weeks to pick apart the proposed schedule, I can come up with 25 reasons I don't like it. But, you give me the existing schedule, you give me 4 weeks, I can do the same thing. So, you just got to sort of focus on the student achievement. But my second question, which was less significant, but I did want to ask it because I didn't ask it ahead of time, and it sort of goes to school safety, and so you're going to have, you're going to have more hall monitors, or how is the bell going to ring? How's this going to work if a class? It's kind of a silly question, right?
No,
But
it's not at all. It's not. We're really operating 3 mini schedules within a building, and it does happen in a lot of places. Currently, we don't have bells in the building. We have a bell schedule, and the teachers dismiss the students at the appropriate time. And we would talk about perhaps having bells, but they would be ringing all day long because of the different exit times and the different start times of the lunches. And so with that flex scheduling period, and you're in the middle of a lab, you certainly don't want a bell ringing to disrupt the kids or get them off track. But it is something that we have thought about. There will be kids moving throughout the building at different times. And the way that we structure the building right now, the kids have to be in a certain place or a certain area of the building, and we know where they belong. So if they're in the wrong place at the wrong time, that's not a good thing. But we don't see it as a security or a safety issue. Certainly, we focus on having order in the building, and we think that the structure would be able to keep that. But it certainly will be a change for all of us to adjust to, because we will have multiple periods changing at different times.
Right. And something I brought up via email that it's always a bugaboo. I always think of it when I see the middle school schedule. You know what I'm going to say is we don't write down we don't account for we do account for the passing time or the trip to the lockers, but we don't actually put it on the schedule. So is that like 5 minutes out of the day that you?
No, it's probably more than that. We incorporate about 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Because the kids who are in their actual wing, who are just passing across the hall to their major subjects, and then they go off team, which might be more like 3 minutes. So we incorporate that at all the passing times, and we still, taking that time out of the existing schedule, we still meet our time on learning requirements of 900 plus hours.
Okay. Thanks.
Mrs. Burns, I'm just going to ask a couple before I call on you again, if you don't mind.
I can ask.
It's okay. I just had a couple of little detailed questions, because all my other questions have basically come up. In the pods, if people wanted to work together, could they, like, if you're a 7th grade, you're across 7th grade, but you'd want to work with someone, or you seem to be doing the same kind of thing as someone in one of the other houses, is there an ability to do that, to cross houses to work together, or they have to be teams in the same team? You know, the back-to-back, the science and the math and the English and the social studies.
We don't do that now, do we?
Yeah, sure we do. It's not formalized. I think that the teachers, we want a collegial school. We encourage teachers to collaborate with each other. We don't say, no, that you're not on that team, you can't work with them. I think that sometimes I think it becomes difficult because people end up feeling isolated in their classrooms a little bit sometimes, so it's easier to work with the person who's next door. But there is a lot of cross-team discussion and collaboration that isn't necessarily formalized or even really talked about, but it just
Right.
kind of happens. Oh, I'm doing this, or and what are
I
you
know that the
doing?
teams work
Specifically
very
with the
well together.
kids.
I'm just questioning whether,
Specifically with the kids,
Yeah.
those kids would remain on a team
Right.
within their
Right.
pods. So they would be paired with a social studies teacher. They wouldn't,
But it would
the
have to
teachers
be-
wouldn't get to choose,
No,
depending
okay.
on the time of year or depending on the curriculum, which teacher they would want to work with.
because having done this, it's not going to work unless they want to work together. So that's just one reality of it.
Those
And,
relationships have to be built.
right, and it really works really well when you do work together and you respect each other and you know what you're doing, you like to do that. So that's just one thing. Another thing is the writing workshop. Is this going to be, who is this under? Who's in charge of that? And I see that you're expanding that and it's having its own little piece.
It's an area that we know that we need to work on, and I know that, working with Dr. Macklis, we have a couple of electives right now within the English Language Arts Department. Some of those might be going away to bring this focus on writing in. So I know that we would work collaboratively to make a successful program.
So-
But the curriculum would still have to be developed.
So a seventh grade teacher who's teaching English now might be teaching this writing course instead of the,
Not
who's
necessarily.
teaching the writing course?
Not necessarily. It might be one of our literacy specialists, one of our reading teachers. It could be one of those teachers. It's not necessarily going to be an ELA teacher from a team.
And how many of them are you putting in for next year, the writing course?
How many 7th and 8th graders would receive that course? So some of those teachers would have sections of that course perhaps in addition to some of their reading classes.
And would these possibly be teachers who haven't already thought about doing that? Is it going to be like open to teachers, or we might have to tell teachers this is what you're teaching?
We might be assigning teachers their
Yeah.
caseload, their teaching load.
Thank you. And the one that concerns me the most is the reading, particularly the sixth grade reading program. Do I understand this, that now they have reading 5 days a week?
For a semester,
For a
yes.
semester. They're going to go down
90 days.
they're going to go down to 2 days a week, even though it's for the whole year.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say that's the one thing I really have a problem with. I feel that reading, that's part of helping to increase the MCAS scores, is the reading. And it seems to me that there's got to be, I don't know, I wish there was some way that we could get that reading up, so that it's...
More times per
If
cycle.
you're reading once on Monday, and then you don't do it again until Friday, and then the next week you do it on a Tuesday, for reading, to me, it seems that that's not, it's too complicated, and it's too much, and the kids need it, they need to be doing it on a constant basis.
More continuity.
More continuity.
It's actually even worse than that, right? Because it would be back to back, so it'd be Monday, Tuesday, then they wouldn't read
Yeah.
again until next week.
Right, and so I find the reading, I wish we could think of some way to fix that reading. And instead of health in the sixth, it's in the 6th and the 8th grade, but what are they doing in the 7th instead of the health?
Instead of, they have tech ed, where the sixth graders do not have tech ed, and they will have writing workshop.
Okay, and then the 8th grade is a little different, though.
They have health, tech
'Cause they
ed,
haven't health.
and writing workshop.
Tech ed.
They have the possibility
All
of
right,
taking
and
all three.
Tech Ed is the Dave Pinette, Kevin Welch.
Engineering, yes.
Engineering
Science and
program.
engineering.
Because I get completely confused when we do the Tech Ed and the
Computer literacy.
computer literacy, okay? And then, I was concerned with my union hat on when I did that for years. I hope that we're closer to, before we vote on this, I personally would like to be closer to knowing how the union stands on this and how much impact bargaining we're going to have to do, or if it seems something that they're going to be supportive of. I just think that's going to be a major issue. I hope it's not, but I worry about that part.
We can't do it unless you prove it. I mean, I'm not going to I can't impact bargain if there's nothing to impact bargain over. So you're going to have to
Oh,
approve it
so we-
before I can impact bargain it.
So we would approve it without having any information on how the union feels about it? I see what you're
It is
saying.
our
Yeah, it
prerogative
is our prerogative to do,
to
right.
do a
Yeah,
change.
okay.
But it's, all right. I think it might lend to what you're looking for, with learning a little bit more about how teachers feel about it in themselves. Not to say that
Right.
it would be, it
Well,
would be good
the-
feedback. you know.
Everyone was invited tonight, right? They were invited to come,
Everyone on the think tank,
and
yeah.
think tank was invited to come. We'll invite them to the next meeting as well.
I'm just saying it might answer
Right.
what you're, it might offer some information to what you're.
I would hope, I have to say this, I would hope that you will look at the goal of this change and not weigh familiarity and being comfortable but with what is versus
What is needed.
what is needed.
But
Right.
in saying that to Mrs. Benton, because I'll be the first one to tell you, I'm not a big fan of change, but I think this is something that I'm surprisingly not so hung up on, but what I am hung up on is in the details, and I want to see a little bit more structure, because there's no sense in giving them that gift of being able to extend their time to reach these students if they're not using that instruction both time managementally and effectively. Because all of this transition and all the loops, you're gonna, if all the changes everyone is gonna go through, if it's in vain, it would frustrate the heck out of me. I am all about in agreement with regards that we need this change, mostly for the MCAS, but because we want to give our kids a well-rounded education and not just to the MCAS. MCAS is a data-driven measure of our successes, and we're not going to get away from it. But we need to give our children well-rounded, and we need to start giving the teachers those tools to be able to deliver that more successfully. And so I'm hoping to see that as plans, whatever preliminary strategies do start taking place, that we can see that instruction and those changes that will benefit from where we are currently now with our teachers. So that's how I stand with it. So.
I think that as this night has gone on, for me, it's been really enlightening. And I think that the questions that people have asked, you've been able to allay some of our fears. And because I think part of this problem has been the process is that, and it's not a problem, part of the process has been that we get the process and we look at it, and then, like we all had, it was interesting to see what our different concerns were. I think that shows you that, just where our backgrounds are coming from and everything. And we're all very grateful that you've done all this work, and we agree that we need to do something. I think we worry about the little technical things because those are the only things we can grasp and make a change on. Those are the only things we can help make things better through. Once we've said, we're going to go with this overall, and it looks like that's what will happen with the overall idea of it. It's then when you get to the details that for us, we just want to make sure that everyone does what they're supposed to do and that they get the support, the teaching staff, which it looks like you've built in. So we have to be positive and be forward about this, and I think we'll put it off again till the next meeting. We will.
Invite you back.
Yes, we'll invite you back to the next meeting, and it will not be this deep, we won't be going into it in this depth, I'm sure. If anyone has any questions that could be answered, please send them to, through Mrs. Benton to Miss McMenamin, and make sure that we all get the answers. I had sent you all different questions that people had sent, so make sure that we all find out the information, so we'll be on the same page. And so I think, thank you very much for coming, for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. I know. All right. Now, our next item is approval of the SAT review courses.
In your packet this evening is the pamphlet regarding the spring SAT prep classes that Ms. Peters runs at the high school, and we need your approval.
Okay, so I would entertain a motion to approve the SAT review courses for spring 2013. Mrs. Bosch.
I make a motion to approve the SAT classes for spring of 2013.
Thank you. And second, Mrs. Burns. All those in favor? Unanimously. Okay. Our next item of business is the vote authorizing the town manager to execute contracts or amendments to contracts for the work associated with the high school construction project.
And I put before you a official motion that town council has approved. This is to authorize Jeff Powell, town manager, to execute on behalf of the town of Wilmington and the Wilmington Public Schools all contracts for the construction and improvement of the new Wilmington High School pursuant to the project approved by the Massachusetts School Building Authority, to execute all contracts for the purchase of services, supplies, equipment, and materials in connection therewith, and to make final binding decisions in connection therewith pursuant to Town Manager Statute, ST 1950, C 592.
Okay,
By the town bylaws.
entertain this motion. Mr. Hayes, I like the way you say it.
So moved.
Thank you. Second, Dr. Quick. All those in favor? Unanimous.
Thank you.
Sorry, I was distracted. I was trying to figure out what these squiggly lines mean here.
I know.
We don't know. Okay, that takes care of that. Our next item of business is public comments. It's nice to see people in the public. Thank you for taking your time to come tonight. We appreciate it. Okay, and other reports, any subcommittee reports? We'll start with Dr. Quick.
Very quickly, just a quick change. The Educational Foundation has extended, we extended by 1 week the registration for the teams for the WEF Spelling Bee, which is on March 14th. It was the 28th, but we moved it because I know some people had some issues with February vacation and stuff. So we moved the registration deadline to the 7th of March. So for anybody, please, the more we welcome teams. We're really looking forward to this. This is taking place, because we've had a few questions, this is going to be taking place of the vendor fair that we've been having every spring. So this is going to be our one spring fundraiser. So, everything that we can get is always helpful, so please spread the word. March 7th is the deadline. I've had a number of people ask me, they say, I'm terrible at spelling. So the thing to remember about this is, there is no individual spelling. It is a team of 3. Yes?
Does phonetic spelling count?
Okay.
Where the flexibility is.
But the beauty of it is it's a team of 3. So if you are terrible at spelling, it's charity, first of all. First thing to remember, it's for charity and for our schools. And the second thing to remember is that it's a team. So there's no individual spelling. Thank you very much.
That's good. Thank you. Do we have Mr. Hayes?
Just wanted to update folks. According to Twitter, Wilmington girls basketball won. They beat Chelsea 65-28.
Wow.
So blowout. First
Wow.
round blowout. So.
Very nice.
Okay.
And the hockey team won last night.
The hockey team won last night.
Thank you.
So the policy subcommittee will be next meeting on Tuesday, March 5th at 8 a.m. at the Roman House. It's my turn to take the minutes. Okay, the high school building committee will next be meeting on Thursday, March 21st at 6:30 at Town Hall. And then the Special Education Parent Advisory Council will be hosting their next workshop also on Thursday, March 21st at 6:30 in the high school library. And they asked me to just quickly plug it here. It's called An IEP for My Child, a workshop for parents and professionals. Every child with a disability who receives special education services must have an individual education program, an IEP. This workshop takes parents step by step through the development of the IEP, including how to articulate a vision, using evaluations to write measurable annual goals, and measuring their child's progress. And that's March 21st at 6:30 to 8:30 in the high school library. And you can contact, if anyone's interested, they can contact Martha O'Brien via email at fjo316@gmail.com. And that information is also posted on the CPAC webpage. And the other thing is the co-chairs of the CPAC wanted me to let the school committee know that at the Wilmington Middle School this afternoon, the Federation for Children with Special Needs ran a successful student enrichment workshop called Defining Your Destiny. Nearly 25 special education students were in attendance. The co-chairs wanted me to publicly thank Director Mary Hood and Principal Christine McMiniman for their cooperation and collaboration in regards to this event, and more generally, wanted to acknowledge the fact that the relationship between the CPAC and the district is strong and working extremely well, all for the benefit of Wilmington students.
Nice.
Very nice. Yeah. Great, thank you.
Yeah.
And I think that's all we have for now. Correspondence, Mrs. Bonish. None tonight, thank you. Future meeting dates. March 5th is the Finance Committee meeting at 7 o'clock in Town Hall, and that's when we try to get to if we can. March 13th will be our next regularly scheduled meeting, and then March 27th. We've also been asked to save the date, it's a long time from now, but we wanted to put it on. April 29th at 7 o'clock will be the National Honor Society induction at the high school auditorium. So I'll just put that on as a save the date. And, did you want to say anything about that?
I will be bringing a proposal at the next meeting to have no school for students on April 30th, as the town has decided to combine the elections. Before, it was just going to be the primary, and now it's going to combine both local and state. So it is our preference not to have students at Boutwell and Wildwood on that day.
Just at those two schools?
Just at those two schools.
I think
And
someone
the
got
teachers will be
excited.
doing professional development. They will be working.
Okay, great. Let me think, I think that is all, okay? I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
7:01.
Dr. Quick,
Motion to adjourn.
second. Mrs. Burns. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you, everybody. Have a good couple of
That
weeks.
April 29th, National Honor Society, my last day on the school.